for me, I can think ahead. And
Okay.
so I think that's one of the reasons I've always loved business is I can think ahead and I can forecast and I can see, what's about to happen, reverse engineer, and then set course.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the How Did It Happen podcast. I'm so happy to have you here as I am with every episode. Before we get started today, I do want to remind you that my new book, Ownership: How Getting Selfish Got Me Unstuck. That word's going to resonate with our guest today. How Getting Selfish Got Me Unstuck is available on Amazon or, of course, on my website, mikemalatesta.com. It's getting really great reviews, and I'd love for you to pick it up and give it a whirl and let me know what you think. I don't think you'll regret the decision, and I would really appreciate the feedback. And and the feedback. The feedback would be good. So enough of me. You're not here to listen to my story today. You're here to listen to my guest, Jon Dwoskin. Joins me on the show. Jon, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks so much for having me. I appreciate it, Mike. It's good to be here.
So let me tell you a little bit about Jon so that you can get as excited about him as I am. Jon Dwoskin is a business coach, author, and speaker, and he's been a founder, an entrepreneur, and an executive at the highest levels. His Think Business podcast with over 1,200 episodes, I thought I had a lot at 240 something or whatever this is. Jon is blowing me away, but 1,200 episodes, it's remarkable, provides one-to-one, in-depth, and soulful conversations with executives, managers, and salespeople who are making a difference in their companies, communities, and in themselves. Jon's books, The Think Big Movement and How to Think Big, 10 Strategies to Get Unstuck Today, put in writing the wisdom, tools, and strategies he uses to coach and inspire high-level performers, get them unstuck, and have them become the biggest and best versions of themselves. Jon can be found at Jon Dwoskin, that's JONDWOSKIN.com, and on LinkedIn at Jon Dwoskin, same spelling. He's known as the Business Whisperer, so let's lean in and learn. Jon, let's get started. How did it happen for you?
As I sit here, thanks so much for having me on the show. As we sit here, December 15th, recording 2021, I'm 49. I'll be 50 next year. And when I was 18 years old, Mike, my dad gave me a set of tape sets right before I went to college. And he said, Jonathan, I think you'll do really well in college, but I think you'll learn more from these people than you will school. And it was Brian Tracy, Psychology of Success. And the moment I put it on my ears, I knew it was exactly what I wanted to do for a living. It just resonated with me on such a deep level, almost maybe like a past life level. It just, everything made sense. The way everything was simply put, I just got it. And I thought, this is what I want to do. I want to at that point, make tape sets, I want to write books. I want to speak. I want to help people grow. And I didn't start my business till I was 43. But the business plan started when I was 18.
The coaching business, you mean?
The coaching business, I'm talking. I started a business out of college, but my coaching business, which was planted at that age, I had been building the business plan for decades.
And Jon, for those of us, I do, but for those of us listening who do not know who Brian Tracy is or was, I can't remember if he's deceased or not, but
he's still alive.
Yeah. So who is Brian Tracy, and what about what Brian Tracy was saying in those tapes, clicked with you?
Yeah. Brian Tracy is I guess back in the day, you would call him a motivational speaker.
Yes.
But, maybe today an inspirational speaker. And he's, written books like such as the Psychology of Selling and Eat That Frog and the Success Handbook, Maximum Achievement, and The Art of Closing, like all of these things. And when and so he's great. And what I loved about him was he just seemed to break things down to the simple. Everything he talked about just seemed simple. Scholastically, school was always very difficult for me. And so I didn't know I was dyslexic till I was 30, and so it was always hard for me to retain and do well in school. But when I listened to these tapes, everything made sense. I could retain it. I got it. I understood it. I understood how to execute on it. And it was just basic stuff that was maybe so simple it was complicated to others, but very simple to me. And when I started my business out of college with my brother and a buddy of ours, there was a thing locally called Yes, a Positive Network, where they brought in every month a different speaker. And one of the speakers they brought in, I think I saw him for sure 2, maybe 3 times. One of the speakers was Brian Tracy. And so I would go to I don't remember if it was a 4 or 5, 6 hour seminar. And then we would go and buy all of his tape sets. Right. And then listen to all of them. And it was great. It was great. And every time, and it's interesting because now at this age, I'm listening to tapes 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, still do. But it wasn't until I was 30 that after a test I took to find out I was dyslexic, that I was actually an auditory learner. That was my primary way of learning. And so it made sense to me how I could retain so well versus reading a book. I read a ton, but I retain more when I listen. So to me, Audible is one of the greatest gifts of all time, or the way of learning today, YouTube, Audible, watch, master's class. I mean, I could go on and on. The way to learn for me today is great.
And this dyslexia thing, you said you took a test when you were 30. What was, did you think that there was something wrong, and then this test just became available? Because I know I don't know what the tests are called, but I guess I'm curious.
It was a Waze test. I was having trouble retaining things that I didn't feel like I should have. I was in commercial real estate. I was selling apartment buildings in Michigan. And after a year and a half of working 12-hour days and pounding the pavement, I got $100 million worth of listings in like a week, and 5 different apartment buildings. And I knew them like the back of my hand. I mean, I had been, studying them and underwriting them, and, doing proposals and pitching them to the sellers. And when they hit the market, I was doing a conference call to my Chicago offices, and I couldn't remember. People were asking me questions, and I couldn't remember with the answers. I couldn't retrieve some of the things. And so I called my therapist at the time, Dr. K, and I said, something's wrong with the way I'm learning. It doesn't make sense that I couldn't retrieve certain information that I know that I've spent 100 hours on. So I took a 5-day, I think it's called the Waze, WAIS test. And it was like a 5-day test, 2 hours a day. And he said, you should buy the book, Living with Dyslexia. So I said, for who? He's like, for you. Right. And so for me, I don't necessarily read backwards or things of that nature, but from for me, where it really sits in is from a retrieval standpoint. So what I learned how to do, Mike, is I learned how to prepare differently. And so when I looked at the back of the situation that I told you about, I had left the office on Friday, didn't look at the deals again until Monday morning. Didn't even look at them because I figured I knew them for the Monday morning call. I think it was like at 8 o'clock or 8:30 in the morning. And, that weekend I had probably toured properties or this and the other, but too much time had gone by for me to retrieve it off the top of my head. And so what I've learned to do is create cheat sheets, write everything down, glance at my notes, because then it pops right back into my memory. or I can then speak to it. And even in my business now, I can type as fast as I can talk. My dad, when I was in high school, it was mandatory to take 2 semesters of typing. And my dad always said, whatever class you pay attention to, pay attention in typing. It'll serve you really well. So I can type almost as fast as I can speak. So when I'm talking to clients, coaching, and I'm coaching them in a very customized, high level way, and I'm allowing things to kind of come through me and speak to them in real time, I'm also taking notes as I coach and think in real time because I can type in real time. And so it allows me to go for the client to have a full review of what we just talked about, but also for me to go back and refresh my memory. Oh, we talked about this. This was and then I can get right back into the energy of that. But I don't have to rely on my brain to retrieve things. It's just too much energy for me. Yeah. And so I evolve skill sets where, I turn those weaknesses into, I neutralize them.
And that's really interesting that you take notes and typing notes, because a couple of things. One, you had mentioned, Audible and audio and YouTube were sort of gifts, right? That you could then, get information that way. And then I've heard people say, lots of people say, when you're typing, it's hard to remember what you're, the notes, as opposed to writing by hand, because your hand is connected to your brain and that kind of thing. And since you brought it up, I thought, well, you're a business whisperer too. So how do you?
Well, for me, I can think ahead.
Okay.
And so I think that's one of the reasons I've always loved business is I can think ahead and I can forecast and I can see, what's about to happen, reverse engineer, and then set course. And so for me, as I'm coaching someone, I'm like downloading things and I'm typing them almost as if it's like a blackboard in my iframe.
Okay.
So it's hard to explain. It's just kind of how my brain works, right? So someone will say, okay, here, I'll say, okay, tell me what's going on. And they'll tell me, and I can process it kind of, and I can start to kind of hear what they're going to say before they say it, and then see like on a blackboard. So I'm kind of typing what I hear and see in my head.
Okay.
Yeah.
And thanks for answering that, because it's you just have a unique perspective given the dyslexia and the typing skill, which is sort of.
I've had to. Well, it's like you create the tools for yourself.
Yeah.
Because I hate saying this. It's like, it's like people say, well, you don't learn, like the normal or average person or this. I don't know what's average and what's not average. I know everybody needs to figure out, no matter if you have dyslexia or not, everybody's got to figure out how they learn, and then what tools and what tools they need to, I was going to say tricks, but I don't like that word, what tools they need to accelerate. And it's no different than, if there's things I'm not good at, I find somebody who is, and I hire that person. I'm a business coach. I have 8 virtual assistants all throughout the country doing things that I'm not good at, that I don't want to do. So I can spend time coaching and being with clients and doing the stuff that I love. Why exert energy and do something that I'm not good at? It takes me way too much energy, way too much mental energy. And if it falls into anything that that the dyslexia affects, I don't want to do it. I hire it out.
Right.
Yeah.
That's great advice too. I had Glenn Reed on the podcast. I don't know if you know him or not, but earlier in one of his things, he kept saying it over and over. It's like, maximize my strengths, hire all my weaknesses.
Correct. Hire all my weaknesses. Right.
Yeah.
And I don't even consider them weaknesses. They're just things that are not my highest potential. They're not, they're not what is, they're not things I'm good at. That doesn't mean it's a weakness. It's just, I'm not good at it. I don't like to do it, but but you have to do it. I don't like bookkeeping. So I have a bookkeeper, right? I don't send out invoices to my clients. My bookkeeper does. I don't want to do it. There's no interest to me. I don't need to learn QuickBooks ever. Yes, right. Yeah.
And even if you're right, even if you're great at it, you may not like it. And if you don't like it, it doesn't give you energy. And if it doesn't give you good energy, then you shouldn't be
Correct.
doing it,
And
right?
it's not a good use of your time. It's
Right.
like if you're billing out at X amount, per client, and you're doing 25, 35, 40, $50 an hour work, it just doesn't make sense. If you just look at your life at an hourly, what's your time worth? I look at
Yeah.
always what's my time worth? As people always say, my wife and I do a lot of Instacart and with the kids, sometimes we'll order Grubhub and this, and people say, do you know what the fees are? I say, I have no idea. I never look at the fees. What? I just saved an hour and a half not having to go grocery shopping. Like that's priceless to me.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Good point.
Yeah.
So your dad seems pretty wise. The typing, getting you introduced to Brian Tracy tapes. What was it like for you, growing up? I mean, what did your parents do, and what were you thinking about doing before you had this sort of epiphany, listening to Brian Tracy?
Yeah. Well, that's when I was 18. And then when I went into college, I changed my major about 5 times.
Okay.
I knew that's what I wanted to do, but in college, it's not like I wanted to do it, but it's not like I even knew how to do it at that point. I had no experience. It wasn't like I could just, today I feel like the world is such that you could graduate high school or college and become a coach of some type, right? It's just like a different world. But, 30 years ago, it wasn't, the thought wasn't even like that, so I changed my major. I was pre-med for a year. I was an actuarial science major for a year. I was just trying to figure out what I enjoyed. I ultimately ended up double majoring in economics and journalism. I thought I would be a journalist. Like I wanted to be the next Larry King at one point. So I kept on changing my major almost every year of school. And once it didn't, fit, I was, oh, well, maybe this is the major. And so, yeah, so that was kind of, how that rolled. But as far as, growing up in my house, I mean, that's a little bit of a loaded question, but it was filled with a lot of laughter. My mom was hilarious, really funny. My dad worked his ass off, was a solo practitioner dentist, had an office. The people who worked for him, worked for him for 30 plus years.
Hmm.
And he was always home for dinner. And we were a close family unit, and there was, stuff, but, the older I get, like, the more I look at it and I say all the stuff or the drama or this, I really look at it with eyes of my parents did the best they could with the tools they had. They did the best they had, the best they could. They provided for my brother and I, and they were there for us when we needed them. Are there instances where I would have wanted them more? Yes, but they were at capacity. They were at capacity with certain things. And so, I spent a lot of years in therapy, and I kind of, the older I get, the more I get them. Both my parents have passed away. My dad passed away. God, it was, I think 6, 7 years ago. And my mom passed away when I was 25. And so I don't know. So the journey of understanding some of their decisions and them as human beings and them as parents and them as just people is always evolving. As I am married and have 2 children, and my son is now a freshman in college, and my son is a freshman in college. My daughter is a sophomore in high school. I start to get them more and appreciate them more and expand the wisdom with new perspective as I continue to get older. And I don't know if it's because I'm about to be 50. In my 20s, I was pissed. In my 20s, I was happy. In my 30s, I was pissed. In my, at certain things. In my 40s, I was evolving, to understanding. But as I kind of get to 50, I don't know. I just see life differently now. and I don't look at I've been thinking a lot about this lately. So it's funny you asked this question. I don't look at all of the stuff that I once viewed as sad or negative or this. I kind of view it as like, those made me who I am. Those are solid lessons. Those were opportunities that are helping me now in my life. And if I didn't have those, I wouldn't be able to almost be the type of husband or be the father or be the coach in my business that I can be. They've infused so much, so many emotions and so much perspective and so many lenses that I don't know. I'm just kind of embracing it versus being angry by it.
As you were talking your way through that, I was thinking to myself, because I'm 56, so I'm a little older than you, but when you were talking about the older I get, the more I get them, I know for me the experience has been like the older I get, the less sure I am that I know anything for sure.
Yeah, me too. Me too.
Right. So,
me too. Yeah, no, 100%. Right.
So when I was younger and coming up, when I thought I knew everything, of course I could make judgments on
Correct.
how my parents handled this or that, or how my friends handled this or that, or a coworker handled this or that. Because I always thought in the back of my mind, even if I wouldn't say it, that what I was thinking was right.
Right.
And everybody else was thinking was wrong. But I've come to believe that, I'm not sure. I heard a person say, there's no such thing as truth with a capital T. It's all the stories you tell yourself. And I think, you know what? I think he's right.
Right. There's a lot of truth to that. Right. It's like, the older I get, also, I understand about what being present means, meaning I have no clue. All I know is today, an exercise that I started doing, Mike, was at the end of every night, I write down 3 wins, 3 gains from the day, 3 wins that I want for the next day, and 1 thing I'm grateful for. Because my brain will go to the dark side. My brain will play out a negative something, or I will even just, you hear a song and then something happens and then you're triggered and then you remember something when you were 20 that your parents did. And it's like, it takes you down this road. And so I find that for me, for my brain, I have to remind myself every night, hey, this is what I did. These were some wins. These are going to be my wins for tomorrow. This is what I'm grateful for. And that's how I go to bed, right? That's how I end my night. Not that I'm I do it and then I fall asleep immediately, but that's how I'm trying to rewire my brain, is to not get stuck in the gaps of things that are simply a perspective of only mine based on only me. And I, like you said, I don't know if I'm right or wrong, because I find the older I get, the more my perspective evolves. So why get lost in, I try to kind of almost zoom out and be an observer of myself and an observer of the past when that happens.
Yeah.
And try to look at it almost like a movie and be like, okay, I kind of get it now. I can pull a new nuanced lesson from a moment. Or I heard a long time ago, I don't remember if it was in a book or a podcast. I listen and read so much, I forget where I kind of get things from, but they said, can you change the past? And the answer was yes, because you can change your perspective of the past. And I thought that really, so I always try to kind of remind myself. And then when I get irritated at something or someone, growing up, we had one of our neighbors were this family called the Kasheris, and the mom of, they had 6 kids. They were the greatest. They were this Irish Catholic family. We were this Jewish family. I mean, it was the best. We would go there and have chocolate milk. I mean, milk and chocolate cake and ham sandwiches, and and it was the greatest. I didn't have that type of stuff in my house. So, but the mom was an absolute saint. She was an angel. And the story her kids always say is, when they were irritated, she would say, pray for them. Right. And so it's something you don't think about that, but I often try to put myself in that, if I'm irritated, I try to get out of myself and say, okay, I kind of channel in Peggy Kasheri and say, pray for them. And it ground and that being on top with trying to take myself out as being an observer of it, it's like 98%. Like it helps
Yeah.
so much. Yeah.
And what you said about the the gains and the wins, not just for today, but for tomorrow, it reminded me of this whole stuck thing. What's the reason that entrepreneurs and leaders get stuck?
Yeah.
Well, because they are not thinking about the gains and the wins that they had today. They're
Correct.
thinking about the losses, what they're considering to be the losses.
Right.
Anyway, I'm sure we'll get more into that because,
Yeah.
but I'm wondering, you made a comment about coaching and you said, now you can become a coach, say right out of college, you can become a life coach, for example. And I laugh, but I shouldn't laugh because maybe you can. Maybe some people are that evolved. But you just said that sort of wasn't done, when you came out, and you had this long period of time from 21 or so when you got out of college to 43. You said when you started your business, even though you knew when you were 18 that this is what you want to do or something like it. Yeah. So what took all the time for you to finally get to the point where you're like, now's the time?
Now's the time. I graduated college and I started an internet company in June of 95 with my brother and a buddy of ours. And in June of 95, the internet was brand new. We were selling websites and I was the sales guy, grew the sales team. I was kind of the business plan guy as well. And we grew that company. We sold it 2 years later to the largest internet professional service firm in the world. And then we were partners in that company. And so after a couple of years, when my contract was up, I left that, took a little bit of time off. And then I always wanted to get into commercial real estate. My grandfather was in real estate and it always was an appealing business to me. And kind of, I felt like fate played a role in getting me into commercial real estate. When I was 30, I was diagnosed with testicular cancer. And so I had to go through I can't remember if it was 12 or 17 treatments of radiation. And my brother, this deal of my grandpa's came to life that he always used to talk about. And my brother said, what do we do about this? And so I said, well, call such and such, which was this kind of mutual friend that my brother and I had who was in real estate. And so he said, all right, well, we're going to go, we're going for sushi. Why don't you meet us there? And I said, you know what, I can't meet you there because I had an appointment to get I had a radiation treatment. And then I was just nauseous for like months. I couldn't, and the idea of smelling sushi, I thought it was, anyway, long story short, I ended up meeting them in the parking lot. And the person that we met said, what are you doing? I said, I'm just kind of, taking a break right now. And, but I want to get into commercial real estate. I want to sell, buildings. And he said, oh, you should come over to my shop. I said, no, you're a leasing guy. I want to be in investment sales. He said, no, I just moved to this new shop that, recently opened up in Detroit. It was a national company. So I interviewed and got the job and started selling apartment buildings. And so I loved it. I absolutely loved it. I loved being in the commercial real estate space, the energy of it. But then after 6 years, I just got restless of that. I became one of the top conventional guys in my office. And I was just bored. I wanted to, so then I thought, you know what, I'm going to start my coaching company now. And then they offered me the opportunity because the guy who managed their office was getting promoted to a managing director. So he said, hey, if you want to manage this office. So I interviewed, got the job, and they said, you can start August 4th of 08. Well, I thought, all right, I'll do it. And if I don't like it, I still have my database. I can go be a broker, or I didn't care. I had nothing to lose, or I'll just start my coaching business, right? Like that was my mindset. Well, I started August 4th of 08. The market crashed in September of 08. And then my office was just flattened. I mean, it was just like annihilated. If you were in that, if you remember that time, it was just devastating.
Oh, I remember.
Anyway, long story short, I grew that office to be one of the most profitable offices in the company. I grew it to 45 agents, 60 some people. I was on the CEO advisory committee. I was a local, regional, and national sales trainer. They would send me into troubled offices to kind of help figure out what was going on. I was very kind of ingrained in just this kind of coaching element of it. Like, granted, it was commercial real estate, but I was kind of in a way doing my coaching thing. I was hiring, training, retaining, speaking, I was doing all this fun stuff. Well, at about 4.5, 5 years, I started getting a little restless again, right? It was getting a little monotonous. The company was ramping up to go public. And so it was getting really corporate. Mm-hmm. And I had kind of an autonomy. They left me alone. And then all of a sudden it was kind of like, it just was getting suffocating for me. It was losing the creativity for me. And there was a lot of things I wanted to do that I couldn't do. And so I thought, I want to start my coaching business now. So as I was getting ready at around 6 years to resign, I had an opportunity then to go in-house to a 50-year-old company and help restructure them for a year. So I resigned, gave 3 weeks, left on a high note, went in-house to a company for a year, helped restructure this 50-year-old company. Then I started my business, which is now 6.5 years ago as we record this. So it was a little bit of reinvention, a little bit of following the universe. And now I'm a business coach that is basically been in business, right? So I've started a company, sold a company, restructured a company, built an office, been through recessions, right? So I have perspective on things that I don't think I could have done it, but I don't know if I could have done it as well as I can do it since I started the business.
Right. You couldn't do it for real. What I mean by that is for real, meaning you have the real experiences. You could do it from listening to Brian Tracy or whoever today's, Tony Robbins or whoever today's Brian Tracy is, but you couldn't do it for real. That's what I think. That's what I'm hearing.
Well, also, right. So as a coach, I don't mean to interrupt you, but as a coach, I mean, I customize everything I do for every client. I mean, I keynote and I do a lot of group trainings and keynotes, but most of my coaching is one-on-one. And so I'm listening. I'm an active listener in my client's world. And I am able to ask questions so that they can activate something they cannot activate on their own.
Yeah.
Right. And they cannot access it. And then we reverse engineer it and provide tools for them to do. And so that's a gift where I can take everything and customize the simplicity of what they need to do in biteable pieces.
Right. When they're making it complex. Right?
Correct.
And their brain's making it complex. Jon, when you did and I don't know the exact timeline here, so I'm going to ask, was the resignation from the company that bought your internet company, was that tied to the cancer diagnosis, or was just
no.
coincidental?
No, when I was 23, I started my business. I sold it when I was 25 and then left that company when I was 27.
Okay.
Got into commercial real estate. I worked for a company called Quest Communications for a year, just because I wanted to get some experience in a corporate world as an employee. Then when I was 30, right before I got into commercial real estate, when I actually wasn't even working, I had taken some time off. I was diagnosed with testicular cancer. And then I thought, okay, as long as I get through this, and I had a stage 1, it was a big deal, but the best of what you could want. I was able to have children, and I mean, everything was a blessing. Mm-hmm. I thought, okay, once I get through this, I'm going to get into commercial real estate. And then I got into commercial real estate. Now, during my commercial real estate time, when I was 40, I think it was when I was 40, I can't remember off the top of my head, but yeah, it was when I was 40, because I went for my 10-year checkup, and long story short, I'll make it a long story short. They called me and said, your blood came back. You have cancer riddled through your body. We've never seen anything so bad. You got to get into our office. They were ready to start chemo. They were ready to they basically told me I was going to die. And I said to them, I don't believe that. The first time I knew I had cancer, I could just sense it and feel it. I'm not sensing it. I'm not feeling it. I think you're wrong. They said the odds of us being wrong are 1 in a million. So I said, okay, we'll take some emergency CAT scans, ultrasounds, blood work, et cetera. So they did, and they thought I was crazy. they fought me to take the test. And they then called me a day and a half later. So for a day and a half, I thought I was going to die. And then my wife thought I was going to die. It was horribly traumatizing. And they called me and said, "You're right. We botched your blood. You're fine." And so that moment in time when I really was kind of faced at death's door, I really not, but for what these doctors were telling me, a couple lessons from there. One, you always have to be your own doctor. You always have to get a second or third opinion. You always have to listen to your instincts. But that moment made me realize I'm going to do what I love to do, period, the end. And so that kind of stamped, I felt like I had this like get out of jail free card of like losing my fear of death, because it was so, being told to me, and you can't believe everything you hear, right? Now, I think a normal person would have taken that, gone through chemo, and be dead today. Right. But you have to be your own doctor. And so, fast forward, I'm now 49. After I started my business, my dad went to New York, never sick a day in his life, 71 years old, went to New York, had a stomachache, dropped dead in New York. And so it was horrible. Had I not started my own business and I was in corporate America, I would have quit corporate America the next day, because it's just another example of life is short. And for me, not everybody, but for me, I wanted to be fulfilled in my career and love what I do, period. And for me, it wasn't in corporate America, right? It was having my own business where I could control my time, my freedom, my creativity, and be in my highest potential and love what I do.
Yeah. And cancer-free now, Jon?
Cancer-free. Yeah. I mean, it's been almost 20 years. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. So by the way, I love how in your bio, like in my book, I have a chapter, that first chapter starts when I was 4. And I love in your bio, you have like, when I was these milestone events that you remember, when I was 18, when I was 21, when I was 30, when I was 31. It's just a real nice way to sort of segment your life into pivot moments or shift moments, whatever they are. Anyway, just as an aside.
Well, thank you.
So you decide you're going to get started as a business coach. How do you get started?
Just start. You make a plan. I built a 60-page business plan, and I built a plan with every metric, packages, pricing, values, mission, vision, pages of Q&A of questions that reporters would ask me and how I would answer them. I mean, every nitty gritty detail, I created a plan before the company even was started.
Right.
I knew how I was answering questions to the media, and I had big goals, and then I launched it on social media, and I launched doing video tips on social media.
Video tips, like what were the early ones like, Jon?
Hey, this is Jon Dwoskin. Here's a quick tip to grow your business.
Okay, just something simple, quick, simple like that. Okay.
Yeah.
Huh. Cool. And what can you tell me about? Can you remember, or what can you tell me about your first engagement? And then I want to talk about sort of where you are now, and particularly who you work with now, because I'm assuming that over that 6-some-year period, you've evolved and figured out, where you provide the most value, right? Or in what situations.
I work with solopreneurs to Fortune 100 companies and everything in between. I work with C-level execs. I work with leaders. I work with owners of companies. I work with managers, vice presidents of sales, and salespeople. I work with all of them.
Everyone.
And it doesn't necessarily matter. I work with every industry you could possibly imagine. Some clients I work with one of the different groups I just shared with you. Some of them I work with multiple, some of them I work with all. And so it really depends. And the way my coaching works is we do, depending on who I'm working with, a 1 to 5 hour deep dive. And that's usually over 1 to 3 sessions. And then we do 15 minutes a week or 30 minutes every other week, or sometimes an hour a month, or sometimes 45 minutes a week, depending on the shelf life of what the specific client needs. And we strategize for the upcoming week. We set plans. I can hear and see things they can't. I can see things that are hidden in plain sight. I can pick up on opportunities that they can't see or hear, and then raise their awareness, ask them questions to access areas that they can't get to on their own, and then provide an action plan for the week or every 2 weeks for them. And again, I'm typing or recording everything in Dropbox or however that is.
And let me dive into that a little bit, because I'll take entrepreneurs out of it for right now, because I'm not going to assume that an entrepreneur, by definition, has control over the actions that they would take based on your coaching, for example. But others who work in a corporate environment may have more limited, ability to address what I'll call external forces that are impacting their growth or whatever they're seeing you about. Am I right about that? First of all, that can be a challenge. And I'm just wondering how you help people work around something like that, if it is.
One of the key things of what you're talking about is effective communication, right? It's all about how are you communicating? How are you messaging yourself? And how is your brand within the walls of an organization? Something that a lot of times people don't think about are, what is my internal brand here at the company? And when you have a strong brand, you can do or ask much more than if you have a weak brand, right? So in corporate America, if you're over asking or showing up late, or not going the extra mile, or you leave at exactly 5 o'clock and you get in exactly 9 o'clock. I mean, we're not in really that kind of world right now, but you know what I'm talking about. And your brand isn't that weak, then your I don't want to say your demands, but certain things are going to be viewed a certain way. And if you don't have effective communication skills and you're not doing things to work on those, there's certain ways you need to talk and speak within a corporate setting. And you have to learn how to speak. I'm a business coach. I've always had business coaches. I have a business coach now. At one point I had 2 business coaches, a business coach and a communications coach. And so I'm always working on my communication skills, because I'm talking to, CEOs and leaders and salespeople and managers of Fortune companies, as well as solopreneurs. Well, you got to speak to them a little bit differently. I'm not saying not be yourself, but there's certain words and there's certain ways of phrasing, and there's certain time frames you have, and there are certain ways that you have to tee things up. And so if you don't know how I work with as a coach, I work with sometimes a lot of people on, this is how you communicate up and down within an organization. And so it also is a lot of self-responsibility to evolve that skill, which there's so many resources on how to do that. Now, it also means in corporate America, this is for all the people who own businesses or run businesses, you need good managers that allow people to come talk to them as well. The biggest obstacle I see with businesses are managers were hired because they were good at their job, but they don't know how to manage people. And then the company puts them in a very highly challenging position. They don't know how to manage people, and they now have low support and no training on how to do that. I come in, I train a ton of managers from solopreneur companies to Fortune companies, because they don't know how to coach and grow and inspire and evolve people. And so if the manager is a poor manager and isn't accessible and people can't communicate with that person, it's downhill from there. And so it really begins at the top, because whoever is at the top, 95, 98% of everything they do, walk, talk, and say sets the culture for the entire company. It then spills down to the managers. If the managers are poor managers and don't know how to manage people, it goes further down. And then people are scared of the managers, and then scared of who's above the managers. And so it's equally the company's position to create a culture of safety and approachability and accessibility as it is the employees' responsibility to work on their communication skills.
And when you're working with, say, mid-level managers or sales people, or is the company, is the one that's, I assume, that's hired you because they've recognized some deficiency in their own?
Typically
Okay.
companies will hire me. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And when you're talking about getting people unstuck and thinking big, which I love the think big.
Thank you.
I'm 100% believer in think big, particularly for entrepreneurs, because everyone starts out thinking big and then so many end up thinking small along the way. But we talked earlier about how, you do this wins for the day, wins for the next day kind of thing, and just try to keep focus on progress.
Yeah.
What is there sort of a couple of things that you see that tend to get people stuck in a place where they can't see it, but you can see it?
Sure.
And other people can see it so well. And what's the reason for that?
Yeah. A couple of things. One, not in necessarily this order. People don't ask for help, right? You need to be vulnerable. You need to have a growth mindset, and you need to be open-minded, and you need to be accountable to what you do. And you need to be able to have somebody that you can talk to. So, what gets people stuck is they don't want to invest in themselves or in their people, right? I'm a business coach. I work with many business partners who have many people who have business partners who cannot talk to their business partners, who cannot talk to their leadership teams. And so they have me to talk to, they have me to work things through, right? They have me to teach them how to communicate with those people. And so asking for help, having somebody to talk to, not just talk to, but strategize with, set a plan of action, right? All they can see, they're so stuck in the forest, they can't see the trees, right? And so with that, I can kind of zoom out and say, okay, wait, you're missing this. Oh yeah, you're right. Why didn't I see that? Right? Well, it doesn't matter why you didn't see it. All that matters is now that you've raised your awareness and your consciousness, you've raised your frequency and vibration of it. Now let's be an observer of it, and let's come up and let's provide the tools to get you to the next millistep, right? Thinking big, all thinking big is doing small things every day.
Yeah.
To that compound over time to your big. That's it.
Right.
So thinking big isn't like, hey, I want to think big and I got to do big every day. You can't do big every day. You do small little things every day that don't go viral, that compound over time, and patience is the key.
Yeah.
That's the key.
Yeah.
And so, and that is what we all need to remember is that, Rome was not built in a day. And there's a company here in Detroit that had a sign, they were building a building downtown and said, if Rome was built in a day, we would have hired those workers. Thanks for your patience. Right. And so it's really, really important that everybody get grounded and get present in patience, right? Did I do what I needed to do today so we can grow today and make an impact and grow tomorrow? Yes. Okay. Now what am I going to do tomorrow?
Well, thanks for explaining that, because it's so true. If you are looking at going from 1 to 1,000, and that seems super scary, but 1 to 2 doesn't seem scary. But you go 1 to 2, you're closer to getting to 1,000 than 1 to 10, right? Then 1 to 15, and you just keep working your way there. And it makes the big very manageable, right? Small bites, you get there. But you get stuck if all you think is 1 to 1,000. How can I ever do that?
Yeah, correct.
Well, Jon, this has been fantastic. I really enjoyed the chance to explore your story and share it and get to know you a little bit better as well. And
me too.
Congratulations on your careers.
Thank you.
Multiple careers, and on your health, and on the impact that you're making on so many executives, leaders, and entrepreneurs. You're making the world a better place. And I thank you for doing the work you're doing. I told people how they could get a hold of you at the beginning. Is there other ways that you want
Yeah.
people to connect with you?
Yeah. My cell phone is 248-535-7796. I answer my own phone. I answer my calls. Um, and my website is jondwoskin.com. My email is john@jondwoskin.com. No H, Jon. Jon, D as in David, Woskin. And, if anybody's interested in accessing their highest potential, if anybody's interested in, talking about coaching, give me a call. Or you can go to my website and download my books for free. I have tons of podcasts and video tips and ebooks and just tons of, free everything.
And I will attest to, I connected with Jon on LinkedIn through a friend's referral. I left my number and he called me within an hour. He's like, so yes, he calls, he answers his phone and he calls. And that's something
I think
that
it's a big deal.
Most people want to hide behind a lot of stuff.
No, I don't do that.
Oh, to get to me, it's like super hard, right?
Right.
Well,
I'm very approachable and accessible. My clients know this too. I return every call, text, email, same day, period. And, it's very important for me to be, someone was saying to me today, you do your own intro and outro of your podcast. You should have somebody else do it because it'll make it look, grander. I was like, but that's not what I want. I don't want that. I don't want to look grand and unapproachable. I want to look approachable. And because that's what I am. It's part of my brand is my accessibility. Nice. And that's why I run my calendar. I return my calls. I don't have people answering for me. I love helping and growing people and getting them unstuck because again, a lot of times it's hidden in plain sight. They just can't see it. And I work with clients who have been stuck on minor things for years. And then they meet with me and they'll say, oh my God, I can't believe I've been doing it. If I would have just met you 5 years ago, 6 years ago, 10 years ago, et cetera, I would be so much further than I am today.
Right.
And so that is what I do. And I guarantee all my work. I don't do any contracts with anybody. I consider myself a month-to-month investment. I don't like contracts. I don't want people feeling stuck in a contract with me. My bookkeeper sends an invoice the first of every month. My clients pay it right away. And if they don't want to work with me anymore, so be it. That's their choice. And if they feel I didn't bring value, I always tell them, don't pay me. So I'm very, very confident in my ability to be different than any other coaching experience anybody has ever had.
Yeah. All value, no risk, totally
Correct.
guaranteed.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you, Jon.
Thank you, Mike. I appreciate having me on the show.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the How'd It Happen podcast, where we believe that success doesn't happen unless you make it happen. You can subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, or wherever you like to listen. And while you're there, please rate it and leave a comment as well. I'd love to hear your thoughts about the show, ideas for future guests, or whatever you'd like to share. And of course, you can always find me at MikeMalatesta.com. See you next time. Thanks again for listening to the How'd It Happen podcast.